My name is Daniel Carson, and the day I almost got arrested for not mowing my lawn? That was the day everything changed. You think this is a joke? Rick shouted, jabbing his finger into my chest.
You've got until sundown, or I'll cite you for non-compliance and place you under citizen's arrest. I was standing in my own front yard,
holding a cup of coffee, in gym shorts, barefoot. The grass? Maybe 3 inches too long. Maybe. But Rick didn't care.
He was in my face like I'd committed a federal crime. Behind him, Sandra stood with her phone out, filming me like I was some kind of criminal.
Get the angle from the side, Rick barked. Make sure the lawn violation is visible. You two are not even real HOA officers. I snapped. There's no HOA in this neighborhood. Who do you think you are? Rick smirked and reached into his jacket like he was in some kind of low-budget cop show. What he pulled out looked like a badge. If badges were printed on flimsy plastic and laminated at Kinko's.
I am the acting president of the Larkridge Community Standards Board, he said, holding it up with pride. And this neighborhood agreed to our oversight the day the subdivision was platted.
Page 6 of the deed restrictions, maybe read it sometime. I laughed. Out loud.
That board was dissolved 10 years ago.
And even then, you were just the guy handing out flyers about recycling bins. That's when he lost it. Rick stepped closer, inches from my face. You've got until 7 p.m., Carson. Cut the grass. Or I'm coming back with backup. And with that, they walked off. Sandra zoomed in on my lawn one more time like she was capturing evidence for the FBI.
A couple of neighbors peeked from their windows, probably wondering if I had just committed suburban treason.
I should have let it go. I should have just laughed, ignored it, gone inside. But something snapped inside me that morning.
Maybe it was the fact that Rick and Sandra had been harassing other families too. Or maybe it was because they thought they could scare people into obedience.
But mostly? It was the way Rick looked at me like he owned me. And I don't do well with bullies. So I turned back, set my coffee down, and walked straight to the garage. Not for the lawnmower, no.
I grabbed my phone, my files, and the letter I got last month from Sandra's board threatening to fine me $200 for not trimming my hedges to compliance height.
This wasn't just a petty argument anymore. This was a full-blown scam. 10 minutes later, I was on the phone with the county records office. Hi, yeah, I said, can you confirm whether the Larkridge Homeowners Association is currently active? The lady on the line didn't even hesitate.
We haven't had an active HOA listed for that subdivision since 2013.
I smiled. And are citizens' arrests valid over lawn height? She actually laughed.
Sir, unless you're committing a violent crime or trespassing, no one has the authority to arrest you for tall grass.
That was all I needed to hear. By noon, I drafted a formal complaint.
By 2 p.m., I had statements from 4 other neighbors, one who was threatened over a Halloween decoration, one who was told her wreath was non-standard, and 2 elderly folks who actually paid fines out of fear.
By 3 p.m., I called the real police. Let us handle it, the officer said. You did the right thing reporting it. But by 5:45 p.m., Rick was back. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought 2 of his buddies, middle-aged guys in tucked-in polos and sunglasses, like they thought they were part of some HOA SWAT team. Rick held a clipboard. You've officially failed to comply. You're now in violation of Community Code Section 3.7.4. I'm going to have to escalate. I stepped off the porch and faced him. There is no Section 3.7.4. There is no community code. There is no HOA. That's not your call to make. Rick barked. You're obstructing lawful community operations. You're harboring blight conditions. You're now facing legal consequences. You're bluffing, I said. And I've already reported you to the police. The real ones. So I hope you brought your best fake badge, because you're gonna need it. Rick blinked. Just once.
Then his two backup dancers shifted nervously.
He's trying to intimidate us, Rick said loudly. Sandra, keep recording.
No, I think it's you who's been doing the intimidating, I said, stepping forward. You've been bullying this neighborhood for months.
Threatening people. Taking money. Pretending you have authority you don't. But that ends today. And then? Sirens. Right on cue. 2 county sheriff cruisers pulled up at the curb. Doors opened. Deputies stepped out. Calm. Serious. Rick froze. Mr. Dalton, one of the deputies asked. We've received several complaints about impersonation and harassment related to false HOA enforcement. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Sandra's phone slowly lowered.
One of Rick's officers took a step back.
Officer, this is a misunderstanding, Rick began.
But the deputy cut him off.
You have identification? Any legal documents authorizing you to issue citations on behalf of a registered organization? Rick fumbled with his clipboard. The deputy looked at me. You Mr. Carson? I nodded. You did the right thing.
We've had similar complaints, but you brought the evidence.
We'll take it from here. The next minute was unforgettable. Rick tried to argue. Sandra tried to backpedal.
One of the deputies actually held up the fake badge and said, "Sir, this is a Halloween prop." And then, just like that, they were escorted to the cruisers.
Not cuffed. Not arrested. Yet.
But very clearly in trouble. I turned and saw Margaret down the block, standing on her porch.
She raised a hand and gave me a little wave. She'd been scared of Rick too. If someone tries to scare you with fake power.
If they flash a badge they printed themselves.
If they act like they make the rules when no one voted them in. Stand your ground. Speak the truth. Fight back. Because sometimes, the grass isn't what needs cutting. It's the bullies who think they own the yard.
I didn't sleep much that night.
Not because I was scared.
No, those days were over. I couldn't sleep because for the first time in months, I felt angry with purpose. Not just at Rick, not just at Sandra, but at myself, too, for letting it get this far before standing up.
See, the problem wasn't just Rick waving fake citations around. The problem was the silence. Ours.
He'd been doing this to people for years, and no one stopped him. We'd whisper about it, sure, over fences, behind doors, under our breath.
But no one ever confronted him. Because we were tired. Because we didn't want drama.
Because it was easier to cut the grass than fight the lie.
Until now. At exactly 8:03 the next morning, I went door to door. First stop? Mrs. Wilson, 4 houses down.
She was 73, lived alone, and told me last month she got a warning notice from Rick about her mailbox being 2 inches too short. She paid the $75 fine in cash.
No receipt. Next. The Gutierrez family.
They got cited for holiday light overextension. A real offense, according to Rick's made-up rulebook. Then came the Changs, the Williamses, even the Hartleys, who had just moved in and already got a notice about a non-compliant driveway tone.
It was insane.
By noon, I had 8 signed statements and 2 cell phone videos.
And by 2 p.m., I had something even better, a name. Rick's fake HOA wasn't just some made-up club.
He had registered it under a private LLC.
That's right. Rick Dalton created a company called Larkridge Community Standards LLC and made himself president.
Then he created fake bylaws, fake forms, and started issuing real invoices to scared families.
And you know what he did with the money? Not fix potholes. Not plant trees.
He bought freaking patio furniture and golf clubs.
The scam wasn't just annoying anymore, it was fraud.
So I called the sheriff's office again.
This time, they took it up the chain. A detective named Ruiz met me the next day.
She was sharp, no nonsense, and clearly sick of people like Rick. She looked over everything, the fake citations, the LLC documents, the statements. "This guy's been running a full-blown racket," she said. "He's got zero legal authority, and if we can tie payments to threats, that's extortion." I told her, he didn't just make threats. He followed through. People were scared. They paid to stay off his radar. Ruiz nodded. "Let's take this public. Let's make sure the neighborhood knows what's going on." And that's when it happened. The revolt. We created a Facebook group, Larkridge Residents for Real Truth. Within 24 hours, 67 people joined. By the end of the week, we had over 120. Story after story poured in. Some were small, like notes on doors. Others were bigger. One woman found out Rick had accessed her backyard without permission to measure foliage spread. Another man had surveillance footage of Rick and Sandra opening his mailbox to verify address compliance. This wasn't just a nuisance. It was criminal. And people had had enough. Saturday morning, we held a meeting at the community center. I expected maybe 15 people. Over 60 showed up. Standing room only. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months sat side by side. Elderly folks with walkers. Moms with toddlers. Husbands who thought they were alone in this. And I stood at the front, not as some leader, but as a man who'd finally decided not to stay quiet. "We're not here to attack Rick," I said. "We're here to stop the lie." I showed them the LLC documents. I read out loud the county's confirmation that there was no legal HOA. I listed the names of people who paid money under threats of fines and arrest. And then I passed around a petition. By the end of the meeting, 58 people signed it, requesting a formal investigation and pressing charges against Rick Dalton for fraud, harassment, and impersonation. Detective Ruiz was waiting outside in her unmarked car. I handed her the clipboard myself. That night, Rick finally broke his silence. He posted a furious rant on Nextdoor, calling us ungrateful, disorganized, and disrespectful. Said we were destroying the beauty and harmony of the neighborhood. He claimed we were siding with chaos over order. But nobody listened this time. Because this time, we weren't afraid. The next day, Sandra deleted all her videos. Rick's HOA website mysteriously disappeared. And a week later? A white unmarked car pulled into Rick's driveway, and he left in the back seat, without his sunglasses or clipboard. We heard later he was facing multiple charges: impersonation, mail fraud, trespassing, and unlawful collection of funds. But that wasn't the best part. The best part? Was the next Saturday. When the neighborhood came together to plant a community garden in the very yard Rick once called non-compliant. And for the first time in a long time, we all smiled. Together. Call to action, end of section 2. To anyone out there being pushed around by a self-appointed bully. To anyone paying fines just to keep the peace. To anyone afraid of rules that no one ever voted on. Check the facts. Stand with your neighbors. Speak the truth. Because once the truth is louder than the fear, no fake authority can survive it. I thought it was over when they took Rick away. I thought we could breathe again, like the nightmare had passed, and we could finally mow our grass without looking over our shoulders. But then the real storm hit. 3 days after Rick's arrest, I got a knock at my door. It wasn't a neighbor this time, it was Detective Ruiz again. She wasn't in uniform. Her tone was tight. "We executed the search warrant," she said. "You're going to want to see this." I followed her down the street, back to Rick's house, the one with the perfectly trimmed lawn, color-matched shutters, and zero mail in the box. The same house where he used to walk out with that smug little grin and a clipboard like he ran the whole block. Except now, the police tape across the door said otherwise. Ruiz didn't take me through the front. She walked around the side, to the garage, the one that had always stayed shut, even in the summer. She lifted the door slowly. And what I saw made my stomach turn. Inside, it looked like a miniature war room.
Whiteboards covered in names are names, with addresses, photos, red ink markings, even timelines.
Rick had cataloged everything: who parked where, who left trash cans out, who painted their fence, who had packages delivered too often, even who ordered food too much.
There were notes next to every name. Chronic violator. Weak. Will pay without question. Needs pressure, warn once, then cite. I saw my name. I saw my wife's. I saw my son's. Next to my son's name, it said. Plays loud music. Watch closely. Try noise citation next. I clenched my fists so hard they shook. But that wasn't all.
In the back of the garage, there was a table.
On it? Folders. Real estate listings.
Not just for sale properties, but our homes. Printed documents with estimated values, projected compliance penalties, and next to each, a handwritten note.
Potential acquisition after lien threats. That was it. That was the game. Rick wasn't just a bully, he was trying to take over the neighborhood, one scare tactic at a time. The plan was crystal clear. Fake fines. Fake citations. Real payments. And when someone got tired of the harassment and sold their house out of frustration, Rick, through a shell company, would try to buy it on the cheap. He was flipping lives for profit. And he wasn't alone. Ruiz looked at me, quiet for a moment. He had help. Financial records link some of this to Sandra. She opened an account under a trust that's tied to the LLC. I wanted to scream.
Sandra, the woman who called me uncivilized for growing tomatoes in my backyard, was out here scheming like a mob wife.
But what really drove it home was what they found in the file cabinet. Fake citations already filled out. Dozens of them. With names. Dates. Violations. Some of them were for things that hadn't even happened yet. He was planning weeks, months ahead. One form said, October 17th, Gina Martinez. Halloween decor too early. It was September 12th. This wasn't about grass. This was about control. Ruiz said the charges were expanding. Fraud, impersonation, conspiracy, mail tampering, and now? Intent to unlawfully acquire property under false pretense. Rick was going down. But the fallout was just beginning. People were furious.
Neighbors who had paid thousands over the years were demanding reimbursement.
Some were exploring a class action suit. Local news caught wind of it, ran a segment called the HOA that never was. Rick's face was plastered all over TV. Sandra's TikToks? Turned into memes.
But what mattered most wasn't the exposure.
It was the healing.
For the first time in years, people were talking again, not just behind closed doors, but on porches, at block parties, across driveways. One man told me, I didn't even realize how scared I'd become, until I wasn't anymore.
Another said, I almost sold my house because of those letters. Thank God I didn't. And me? I stopped being afraid of confrontation. I started mowing my lawn exactly how I wanted. And you know what? The birds came back. The grass looked greener.
My son started playing music again, louder this time.
Because freedom doesn't grow in silence.
It grows when good people stand up, together.
Call to action, end of section 3.
If someone is using fear to control your peace, ask yourself,
who gave them that power? If the answer is no one, then it's time to take it back. Talk to your neighbors. Share your stories. And never, ever underestimate the strength of one voice, backed by many. Because fake authority might make noise. But real truth? That echoes forever.
I walked into that courtroom with my head high, but my fists clenched in my pockets. It had been 6 weeks since Rick was arrested.
6 long, bitter weeks of waiting. Watching lawyers circle like vultures.
Watching Sandra post old videos like nothing had happened.
Pretending she wasn't under investigation for conspiracy. But today, the truth would finally speak. Not whispered across fences. Not muttered behind closed doors. But loud. Public. Unstoppable.
Rick sat across the courtroom, smug again.
Suit, tie, slicked back hair like he was some misunderstood hero.
The kind of man who weaponized charm and smiled while ruining your life.
He looked at me like he still held the leash. He didn't. The prosecution began with the evidence from the garage. They laid it out piece by piece. Fake citation forms. Financial records. Sandra's trust account. Testimonies from victims who'd paid thousands for non-existent infractions.
The judge listened closely, barely blinking. But when my name was called to testify, something shifted.
I stood up.
I took that walk to the stand. I raised my right hand, swore the oath, and looked right at the jury.
Then I began. My name is Marcus. I live on Elmwood Drive.
The same house I bought with my wife 16 years ago. The same house I almost sold because of that man right there.
Rick never flinched. He didn't need to.
He still believed in his performance.
I kept going. For years, I paid fake HOA dues to a man with no legal authority.
For years, I got threatening letters that made me question whether I even had a right to sit on my porch. I was told to cut my grass within regulation height, to remove unauthorized wind chimes, and to limit visible backyard activity.
The courtroom was dead silent.
My teenage son got a noise violation for playing his guitar at 4 p.m. on a Saturday. I was warned that my grill produced excessive smoke when we had a birthday party. The jury stared at me, eyes narrowing.
But here's the thing, there was never an HOA. Never a board. Never a vote. Just Rick, a clipboard, and a fake badge. I turned toward Rick then.
His face tightened for the first time. You made us afraid of our own property. You made elderly neighbors cry over mailboxes. You made single moms question if they were doing enough. You played judge, jury, and collector because you wanted control.
And when people got tired? You made offers on their homes.
The judge leaned forward slightly.
The air in that room was thick now. I didn't come here today just to tell my story.
I came because Rick Thompson thought nobody would fight back. He thought we'd stay quiet forever.
But I'm not quiet anymore. I looked at the jury again. And neither is this community.
I stepped down, feeling something crack open inside me.
Like a chain had fallen off.
And then came the part Rick really didn't expect.
The prosecutor rolled in a TV. Played a short, grainy video. It was security cam footage, from my own doorbell camera. Rick, dropping a citation in my mailbox. Dressed like a mailman. With Sandra waiting in a golf cart on the curb.
Federal mail tampering, impersonating a postal worker, both felonies.
Rick turned pale.
His lawyer leaned in, whispering fast.
But it was too late.
The jury saw everything. By the end of the trial, the list of charges had grown.
Fraud. Harassment. Criminal impersonation. Real estate coercion. Mail fraud. Conspiracy. And the verdict? Guilty. On all counts. Rick's sentence was 15 years, no parole for at least 8. Sandra?
5 years for her role, plus restitution to the victims.
But more than that, we got our dignity back. The fake HOA dissolved, obviously. The court ruled that all citations were null and void. Every cent Rick collected had to be paid back. And me? I walked out of that courthouse not as a victim, but as a voice. A father. A husband. A man who said no more. If you're being bullied by someone hiding behind a title, ask them this. Who gave you the right? If they can't answer, they don't have it. Stand up. Speak out. Don't let fear sit on your porch and tell you how to live. Because sometimes the biggest change in a neighborhood doesn't come from a new law or a new rule.
It starts with one neighbor who finally says, "Not on my street." I wish I could say that everything went back to normal after Rick was sentenced. But the truth is, things didn't go back to how they were. They got better. It started with the fences. Not the kind that divide neighbors, the ones that had become symbols of fear and silence. The ones Rick used to measure with his ridiculous yardstick. No. These fences started coming down. People stopped whispering. We started talking. About our homes. Our fears. The things we'd never said out loud. The elderly couple across the street, the ones Rick fined for excessive holiday lights? They invited the whole block over for a barbecue. Turned out, they'd been scared to host anything for years.
And the single mom Sandra tried to evict over a kiddie pool?
We helped her build a real one above ground, clean, and up to code.
The day after the trial, I woke up to a folded note on my porch. It just said, "Thank you for standing up. You reminded us we have a voice." It wasn't signed. It didn't have to be. People had been watching. Even beyond the neighborhood. A local reporter picked up my story.
Then a national news site.
Then TikTok.
It was my speech from the trial, the moment I said, "You made us afraid of our own property, but I'm not quiet anymore."
It went viral. Millions of views in days.
Comments from people in HOAs, apartments, mobile parks, all saying the same thing.
We thought we were the only ones. And just like that, something bigger started. People started emailing me. Asking how to check if their HOA was legit. How to fight back against intimidation tactics.
How to organize, protect themselves, speak up.
I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a politician. But I knew how to stand up.
So I created a page, Stand Up Street by Street.
It wasn't much. Just a few videos at first. Tips. Warnings. Encouragement. But it caught fire.
And then, something I never expected happened. A local councilwoman, real sharp, real no nonsense, reached out to me. Said my story sparked a conversation about housing abuse. She wanted to work together to pass a law requiring HOA transparency and citizen voting. She asked me to speak at a community hearing.
I looked at my wife. She nodded. And I said yes.
Standing in that city hall, I remembered the man I used to be bent over in his front yard, scissors in hand, measuring blades of grass to avoid another fine.
I remembered the embarrassment.
The frustration.
The silence. And then I looked up. At all the people listening. And I said,
I used to think a house was just four walls.
But it's not. It's peace. It's power. And it's ours, not theirs. The law passed 2 months later.
We called it the Neighborhood Fairness Act. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A start Rick never saw coming.
But let me be honest about one more thing. Rick's name? It still comes up. Sometimes new folks move in and ask, "Isn't this where that fake HOA guy lived?" And I always smile and say, "Yeah." And it's where we ended him, too. Because power isn't in a badge. It's in a community. It's in people who watch out for each other. Who ask questions. Who say, "Show me the rulebook." Who aren't afraid to call a bluff and, if they have to, call the real cops too.
I still mow my lawn every weekend.
Not because someone tells me to. But because I want to. And sometimes, just for fun, I let the grass get a little long. Just to remember who I am.
So if someone ever shows up at your door with a clipboard, a threat, and a fake smile,
ask to see their credentials. Ask who elected them. Ask what law they're really enforcing. And if the answer doesn't make sense, you stand. You speak. You shut it down. Because fear only works when we stay quiet. But when one voice rises, others follow. And that's how you take back your block. One blade of grass at a time.